Hi, I'm Councilmember Andrew Friedson, and I have the privilege of representing Bethesda, which is now in its 150th year. Bethesda's always had a vibrant music scene, so now we're going to go join one of the members of the legendary local group, the Nighthawks.
When you think about the history of Bethesda, the first thing that comes to mind isn't usually blues music. But for Mark Wenner of the Nighthawks, so much of his time growing up in the community was all about where he could hear his favorite bands.
This town has always been an amazing musical place.
Beginning in the late 1960s, Bethesda became a hub for blues, rock, and new wave bands to make their break in the music business. At that time, Wenner had a radio by his side at all times, listening to stations like WDON, WWDC, and WHFS.
Those stations played rock and roll, but also before 1959, in 58 and 59, the musical world on radio changed dramatically. Even as a little punk kid, I believed in conspiracy theories because one, we heard all kinds of great music. You know, we heard a total mix of everything. The doo-wop, the rockabilly, real hillbilly, real rhythm and blues, real doo-wop, all mush-mashed together. And then in 58 and 59, that whole phenomenon where Dick Clark and people like that started taking control. So instead of these wild hillbillies from Tennessee, you got these cute teenagers from Philadelphia. So instead of Jerry Lee Lewis and Carl Perkins, you had Fabian and Frankie Avalon.
Bethesda was also home to the Psychedelic nightclub on Cordell Avenue, where national acts like Greg Allman and Joan Jett performed, and Mick Jagger and Jimmy Buffett showed up for a show on occasion. The Nighthawks played at the deli alongside Greg Allman for a period when he lived in Bethesda. Wenner has his thoughts on why the musical talent didn't stay in the area.
We never had the degree of record companies to exploit what we had here. Most of the people that got famous here went somewhere else. Marvin Gaye went to Detroit. Roy Clark went to Bakersfield, I think, or Nashville. You know, these guys were all somebody in the local scene, but there was no record company here to say, woo.
But Mark Wenner and the Nighthawks remain true to the community, and to this day, they are still playing gigs around the Beltway and across county lines. When he's not on the road, Wenner spends time at home tinkering with and restoring the motorcycles he's collected.
And this guy bent these pipes and welded and did a really crude job, and I've been grinding on this, trying to make it pretty.
He has fond memories of growing up in Bethesda, where there was really no need to check in with his parents.
Oh, they never knew where we were, and they weren't worried. I mean, even the dogs just went out. You know, the dog scratched the door, you opened the door. Yeah. And he came back and scratched the door, you opened the door, and he came in.
He went to Somerset Elementary, and after a short, unpleasant stint at Longfellow School for the Boys, he went to BCC High School, where he was a self-described greaser.
The first day of school, I went and sat with my greaser buddies, and the gym teacher called me over and he said, you know, you're getting in with a bad crowd. I said, well, these are my friends, because we actually there were jacket clubs in Bethesda in those days. These were kind of fake street gangs. My neighborhood, we were the Shamrocks. Because one guy had of Irish descent. Of course, you know, me being Jewish, that was slightly peculiar. We had green, and we wore those corduroy athletic jackets. And some of us had Shamrocks written on the back. My compromise with my parents was I could get a green jacket, but not a name on the back. Now, our deadly enemies were the gents from over around, well, they were a bunch of rich boys that I think all belonged to Kenwood Country Club. And they wore blue and white jackets. And then in Bethesda, there were the Peppermints. There were red and white jackets. And then there was the Phantoms that wore black jackets. Now, we were aligned with the Phantoms, but when we had trouble with the Gents, the Phantoms would show up and scare them. So but nothing ever really happened. There was a lot of posturing, and I don't even remember anybody actually even hitting anybody else.
He remembers the Heiser Theater, specifically the bowling alley where the pins had to be physically set, and also how he and his friends would play in the woods that is now part of Little Falls Parkway.
And that was the first place we would go. We would build little forts and tree forts and swing on vines and jump in the creek and all that kind of, Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer kind of stuff.
And although he'll tell you he may have caused a little trouble in his early years, that changed as he saw what this area had to offer.
I was intent on being a rebel with nothing really to rebel against, and kind of intent on, being in trouble for no particular reason. But I got to experience a lot of different people and a lot of different influences. And of course, Washington, D.C. was a bus ride away. And I mean, even in elementary school, they were forever putting you on a bus and taking you to the National Symphony or to the art galleries or something. Not to mention the dirty movie houses that you could get to on a bus. And probably the biggest impact on me was access to the Howard Theater, a very important theater on the East Coast African-American musical circuit.
It was these experiences that ultimately kept Mark Wenner in the community. He says it's been a life full of enrichment.